Welcome to the Third Wheel Podcast at night. Oh, it's not playing. What the heck?
There we go.
I'm Caleb, your host for tonight, and I got my special guest host here today. Say hello to Toomey, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, I think this light turned off, actually. Oh, man, this is today's going interesting today, guys. We've got so many technical opportunities today. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, guys, I'm already loving today's episode. It's going great. How do you feel today, Toomey? How's the drive up here?
It was a little crazy, but
You mind pointing the mic a little bit closer to you? Just pointing it that. Yeah, there you go, and then push it up a bit. Just like that. Beautiful. Cool.
Yeah.
We are all set. So, let's see. What was I going to ask you? Today's a very special episode because I could not get a guest for the at night portion of this episode, which is great. That's fine. But Toomey decided to speed run a series for us. Do you want to tell us about that, Toomey? This was a series I asked you to watch.
series is called Quiet on Set.
Shh.
No talking.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a kid.
And that's this episode. So,
Yes. You want me to describe it or what?
yeah. Are you familiar with Nickelodeon at all?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, which did you grow up on the shows that they brought up?
A little bit, yeah. They weren't my exact thing, except Victorious. I love Victorious for some reason.
So those came out when we were like teenagers,
Yeah.
and I liked them. I wasn't too old for them. I was iCarly was pretty fun. Victorious was a lot of fun. But before I got to watch those, we couldn't watch all of that. We couldn't watch Amanda
really?
Show. Yeah. So wait, I'm kind of curious. How did you grow up with your parents, and what did they allow in the house? What did they not allow? You probably grew up in a very tight run ship household type thing. So
Yeah, so everything that had a bit of witchcraft or something along those lines, couldn't watch. So
literally Sabrina the Teenage Witch was a no-go.
no go. Absolutely no go.
Yeah.
Pokemon, Harry Potter. The funniest one, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, until they figured out that the person who wrote it was a Christian. But
Yeah.
I wasn't reading books.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So me and Chaps are reading Harry Potter, which I think I don't know if you listen to those episodes or not, but those aren't as bad as some of the Narnia books, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Narnia book straight up has black magic, witchcraft. It's got evil, disgusting creatures, and they call them witches and warlocks, and then they use the word like, "Oh man, in the sunlight they looked evil." I was like, "Oh man, none of this is in Harry Potter."
Right.
Harry Potter's so tame compared to some of these Narnia books. I ain't gonna lie to you, but
Interesting.
But yeah, so when I was growing up, I'm sure you heard me say this, they wouldn't let me watch, my parents would not let me watch anything with real people. So no Drake and Josh, which turns out to be a good thing, right? Spoilers for Quiet on Set.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. But it turns out, Drake and Josh couldn't do it. All that, no good. I knew there were fun shows, and every now and then, I tried so hard to watch Amanda Show. For some reason, as a kid, I really liked that. I liked Amanda Bynes.
That one was pretty funny.
Yeah. I didn't know that was Dan Schneider playing the old guy with the white wig and stuff. No clue. Yeah. So
How would you have an idea? They wouldn't tell you.
Right.
It's like, hey, it's Dan. It's just this random person in a hot tub with a 11-year-old. But we'll get to that.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. Okay, so Quiet on Set. Well, leading up to it, we had heard stories about Dan Schneider, and a lot of people brought up the feet stuff. Jeanette McCurdy, I don't know if it's in her book. I didn't read it. I'm reading all these books right now, trying to catch up for the show. But basically, he had a big thing with getting feet shot. So iCarly, there's scenes where she's wiggling her, Jeanette McCurdy and Miranda Cosgrove are wiggling their toes in the camera. But the show, Quiet on Set, tries to dig deeper into it, and so we'd heard stories about Dan Schneider. Jeanette McCurdy brought him up a bit, but she didn't really go deep into it. I will say, after this show finished, I didn't have a different opinion. I don't feel like we got as much into Dan Schneider as we were hoping. But how do you feel about that?
I feel like we got more into the behind the scenes of how he was treating the co-writers and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with the first episode.
Yeah.
Where he was mistreating those two women writers,
Right.
and that was crazy. He made them split their pay, split their salary
Yeah.
for no reason.
Right. So yeah, let's go into episode 1. He was definitely sexist. That's the first thing we want to note. So they didn't talk about any of the creepy stuff that was going on yet. We get to that later in episodes, but episode 1, like he's not paying women the same. You take a salary, say, of $70K a year for 2 people, and he makes all the women writers split that one salary.
Yeah.
We only talked to 2. I don't know if there were more, but imagine just 2 people splitting a $70K salary. That is insane.
Right.
So that's what really episode 1 is about. Is that the one where they kind of talk about one of the guys that was attacking kids on set, or is that episode 2?
No,
Before,
I believe that's episode 2.
Okay, so before Brian Peck, there was another guy that was trying to talk to kids on
Jason?
computers. Yeah,
I think
forget
Jason
his last name.
was in. I forget his last name too, but I think both of those guys were in episode 2.
Yeah, so I think episode 1 definitely talks about the sexism. He basically ran. If y'all have seen that episode of The Office where Will Ferrell, he's got all his. You like The Office, Timmy?
Yes.
You've seen the Will Ferrell episode where as soon as Michael Scott leaves, he has his cronies of men in his office and he's having fun with them, and no women are allowed.
Yeah.
And to avoid any sexist claims, he hires like one token female to have in there, and she's writing notes, and they're kind of treating her like trash. That's how Dan Schneider kind of ran Nickelodeon at the time. So he's making women share a salary, which is insane. I don't know how he got away with that.
Right.
But women aren't as crazy looked at under the microscope back then as they were now. So back then he had so much control over Nickelodeon that anything he said goes, and the studio wasn't really willing to do anything to him because all his ideas were golden. They had ratings, they were funny, they resonated with the target audience. Like, he did so much Nickelodeon wise,
Right.
So, but how'd you feel about that first episode then? Like, what were you thinking when all the women are giving their testimony, basically what was going on?
Yeah, man. I didn't really hear about it until this episode, so I thought it was just like, oh, it's just this weird, creepy guy that likes
Right.
children's feet.
Okay, what was I saying? So, yeah, you're telling me your thoughts about episode 1 and how he ran basically the ship as Nickelodeon being the ship. You're giving me your thoughts on that. Go ahead and finish your thought if you can collect it.
So I didn't realize how much power he had in Nickelodeon. Like, I guess he was bringing in the big bucks, like to treat people like that. And I feel like people knew about it. Like the higher ups knew about it. Like, like someone knew that those 2 women weren't getting paid correctly.
Yeah. How do you feel about that power dynamic then? Like, nobody's willing to say anything to him, so he's willing to kind of do whatever he wants. Like, and they won't do anything about it. Have you ever worked in an environment like that at all?
Not like that per se, but it's just wild to me that he was getting away with all this stuff, because I believe he wasn't letting the parents see their kids at all times.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we talking about? Why do you need to be alone with my kid? Person I don't know.
They don't go into Amanda Bynes till episode 2, right? Or is that 1?
I think that's 2 as well.
Okay. He had this weird thing with her, which we'll get into in episode 2, but basically, yeah, he had an uncomfortable relationship with her, and I'm wondering how much that tied into what he's doing with the parents in the first episode with non-Amanda Bynes actors, where he wants final say over what these kids are doing and everything, and if they don't do it, like, he fires the actor. And that was really, really interesting to me. He was so big on, like, parents, no parents at all, no parents at all.
Right.
And I'm wondering what the reasoning behind that was. One thing I did want to bring up is one of the actors complained about stuff that skits he did. There was one, I forget the kid's name, now he's an adult, but he's covered in some kind of gross stuff for one of the Kids' Choice Awards.
Oh.
Yeah, they went into that.
Was it the kid covered in peanut butter?
Yes, yeah. So he how do you feel about this? He came back later, well after, and said, yeah, I was uncomfortable with those. So how do you feel him coming back after so much time had passed? And he's adding to a narrative that's already going on, that Dan Schneider's a creep or he's power hungry or whatever. How do you feel about him coming back as a sort of a hindsight type role of like, yeah, I was very uncomfortable with that, but well after he was paid, well after he was fired? Does that make you think of anything? How do you feel about that?
Well, I see how it can be a little sketchy, but in this particular case, when he was already doing sketchy stuff around that time anyway, and that's just now coming out.
Sorry,
I don't really think about his involvement with it
yeah.
as sketchy, because like Dan Schneider was sketchy back then. So, and I understand him wanting to keep quiet about that because he had a lot of power in that kid's if he didn't cooperate, he'd be out of there. He'd be fired.
Yeah.
And then he was probably making money for his parents and everything. They probably provided for the family. It's money out of the family's pocket. So
then that was tough to watch because the kid's dynamic with his mom. Imagine your mom basically taking away your favorite toy. You kind of have resentment, or you're mad, and all that kind of stuff. So she's standing up for her kid. What ended up being a good thing on her end. But at the time, the kid wasn't able to see it. All he knew was his mom got him fired from a show that he loved and was passionate about. As far as I know, he wasn't in anything after that that was like significant. So that was like his big breakout. And now all of a sudden, he's not allowed to be back on it. You know?
Yeah, and that's tough. That's a tough dynamic for that mom to deal with as well. In addition to this guy being weird with your kid.
Yeah.
And like to explain that to a 10-year-old at the time is probably pretty tough as well.
Right.
I don't envy it, but I still think she made the right decision, you know?
And that kid kind of got off easy. Like he was covered in peanut butter, and like they even showed a scene where he was on TV expressing he wasn't happy with it. Like, oh, this is weird.
Like while it was happening, he was saying, I don't like this.
Right.
This isn't right. You know?
Right, right. And I will say, like, not everything they showed to me, I agreed with as far as, like, okay, this is very sketchy. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of this was, like, I could see why. I think that one of them was the girl getting sprayed with spit. And I can understand why that would piss somebody off, right? And you're sick of it, but you can't say anything because if you do, you piss off Amanda and Dan Schneider. So, but some of them though, I was like, you know, that I could see why on paper that's a funny bit. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but there were a couple where I was like, you know, like cartoons have always had innuendos. That's not a new thing. Like SpongeBob has plenty that nobody calls anybody out for, but they're in there. Like they make jokes. Like there's that scene where SpongeBob's watching. There's a scene where he's watching corn, and all he's really watching is he's watching this thing. I forget what it is, like the algae, and it's just going back and forth, and it's playing weird music, and he's like leaning in, and he's all excited. And then Gary catches him, he changes the channel. So innuendos in cartoons is nothing new, or even kids shows. Like that stuff's there, and that's for adults to come back and be like, oh, okay, like now I get it.
Right.
Whereas I think that adds to replay value in the long run. But there are a couple of those, especially the early examples of like, oh yeah, this was so weird. And I was like, you know, is it though? Like that seems like a standard practice for kid shows nowadays.
Right.
It wasn't until about episode like 3 where we started seeing some of the deleted Sam and Cat sketches with just Ariana Grande holding like a cucumber. I was like, okay, I could see why this is a problem.
Hold the phone,
yeah. I wasn't on board with those, but the earlier ones, I was like, you know, like I get it, but like also that's like standard practice, so it didn't bug me so much. So episode 1, it's pretty focused. Dan Schneider's not really a creep yet.
He's just a bad boss.
He's a bad boss, a terrible boss, honestly. And I think later, I don't think we'll get time for it this episode, but next episode, I want to watch his weird apology video. Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah. So well, we can watch that live, and we'll have stuff to talk about on that. But luckily, I don't edit these. Shaps edits them now, which is great.
Woo.
So, but yeah, episode 1, he's sexist. I don't think in that episode he's asking them either to give him massages. You remember that whenever he's asking like producers or hairstylists, hey, come give me a massage.
It was mainly the like hairstylists, and
right? Yeah,
smaller behind the scenes parts.
Not
Not the writers, I don't think.
Now, I'm not a woman, so I can't be like, oh my gosh, you're overreacting. But I can see why you'd be uncomfortable with like, hey, give me a massage in front of everybody. Dan Schneider, not an attractive guy, very, very gross looking, and now you're having to. I won't call it degrading. I'm hesitant to call it degrading, but I will say like I understand you being uncomfortable with it, and you know I'm not a woman, so if I was put in that position, like sure I could see why he felt degraded. Like that's not your job to give you a massage. Like he's making top dollar. Like go pay a massage therapist. You know, You know what I mean? But I can understand where they're coming from. They're not comfortable with it. You got to touch this sweaty, greasy,
Yeah, man, it's weird.
Jabba the Hutt looking guy. You know?
Well, you ask me to touch a random person,
Yeah.
a random man, I'm gonna be uncomfortable too.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, man or woman. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it as a man. I definitely don't want to do it as a woman.
Mhm.
But nothing too crazy on the first episode. At first, I was like, okay, I know we're gonna get to the really bad stuff later. But first episode, I wasn't super impressed with. I could see where they were going with it, and it does build into something a better point later on.
Yeah,
But I was like, is this that bad? You know what I mean? Like,
I would say.
the splitting the salary thing was terrible. Like
Yes.
that's awful. Like and women, like he's talking down to people. Definitely, especially if you're a woman, he's treating them bad.
Oh, he actively harassed those two writers.
Yeah, and
That's pretty bad.
that is bad. But nothing stood out to me in the first episode, and even later on. But nothing stood out to me as like, oh man, Nickelodeon was a terrible place to work. It was. I mean, a lot of that stuff is standard Hollywood. Like even when we get to kid abuse, when we get to bad bosses, like a lot of that stuff's just kind of standard Hollywood. You know what I mean? Not that it's good, obviously.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for sure.
But nothing stood out to me. It's like, oh man, Nickelodeon was a terrible place to. I was like, I don't know. That kind of I lumped it with the rest of Hollywood. Like people are being abused on all sorts of sets. Like there's Elijah Wood touched on this in a couple years ago. He said there's a disgusting underbelly of kids being abused in Hollywood. He didn't say Nick. He said Hollywood, and we get a glimpse of it in this, which I love. It shines a spotlight on a small pocket of Hollywood, Nickelodeon, kids channels and kids shows, right? It's a small pocket of a bigger issue in Hollywood that nobody's really addressing.
Yeah, and I don't think the doc went into that much detail on anyone else except Nick.
Right.
Well, like I get it. I
Yeah.
think they only had stuff on Dan Schneider at the time.
Right. And he's a hot topic. He was a little bit of a hot topic issue in general with Jeanette McCurdy's book, because she name drops him and brings up some of the creepy stuff he did and some of his behaviors. She kind of dropped him on there, and that's what kind of got this discussion going. Another thing was let's get to episode 2.
Yeah.
So episode 2, it's a lot better. We start getting to the stuff people really wanted to see. It's gross to think that's what people are really interested in, to hear like, okay, let's hear about these kids getting abused. Like unfortunately, that's one of their major selling points is like these types of stories. Again, was his name Anthony? Was that what it was? Or Jake? What was the guy's name that got arrested in episode 2?
Jason.
Jason.
The first guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason.
So before we get to Brian Peck, which is the guy that was abusing Drake Bell, we get to you said Jason, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm already forgetting this forgettable guy. And what was he? He wasn't a voice coach, was he? He was just another. Oh no, he was like a big assistant. So he's the one who met all the kids in the casting rooms, and he's like, okay, next, or like give me the next 5 kids. He's that guy. And the episode starts off with him getting arrested because he's exposing himself to some of the kid actors that were in smaller roles.
Right.
And I forget who I was talking to, but I was asking them. They're asking me like, how come they didn't get Amanda Bynes, or how come they weren't picking? I was like, 'cause that's harder to do because they're the main character, so there's a bigger spotlight on them. Amanda Bynes is already like under a big scrutiny, or a big like all eyes are already on her.
No,
So
she was a star at that point.
It's hard to abuse somebody like that and get away with it. But what this guy was doing was he was picking on a bunch of other kids, and he was promising them roles if they did stuff for him. So what he was doing was he was reaching out to kids, and he was like exposing himself and asking the kids to send stuff and messaging them. And it's he gets caught by the mom, and the mom doesn't report it. She lets it go. Did you notice that, or did you take note of that? Did you?
No, I noticed that for sure.
What'd you think when that happened?
I was like, not what I would have done,
Right.
but I understand why she did it.
Yeah, so you want to recap what her reasoning was? 'Cause I've long since forgotten that part. I took heavy notes on the Drake Bell stuff, but for her, so what? Remind me what she was saying. You just watched this pretty recently. Do you remember?
Yeah. I believe it's for the same reasons that the first guy's mom. Well, no, because she was in there. She was getting on people's nerves with it, but I believe it had something to do with protecting her daughter from all this, which is cool because she never worked in Hollywood again.
Okay, yeah. So you were, I think she did say like she didn't want to put her daughter in that position of like now she has to testify, she has to do all that kind of stuff. But another thing she brought up was the police are going to say I'm a bad mom. And I was like, who cares? Like,
I
if this,
say, I don't think so.
right? Yeah, and that was one of her quotes. Was like, they're gonna think I'm bad. I was like, no, you know what I mean. It's not
Yeah.
hard. Not that I've done this. It's not hard to trick a kid to turn on their computer. If you know where the camera button's at, go hit the camera button, turn it on. Like that's easy to do, especially like the girl's like 7 or 9 years old. It's excuse me. It's not hard to trick a kid into turning that on, and then you can
Right.
talk them into all sorts of stuff. But I was like, you're more concerned about your reputation with, your reputation as opposed to getting your kid help and or getting this guy in trouble. Because someone like this, like he's so brazen with like, he knew what he was doing. It was very calculated. He was very good at talking kids into sending him stuff or
Right.
turning on their camera so he can send the kids stuff. He was really good at that. So it's like it's not his first time doing it. And I mean, it wouldn't have been his last time either until he got caught. And I don't remember if he was still in jail. He's probably out. Like another big thing is kid offenders don't get a lot of time. They get released like really fast,
Yeah, I thought that was the opposite.
Right.
I thought they were getting like life sentences
No,
and everything.
no. Now they're treated very bad in prison, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But they get beat up in prison a lot, thank goodness. But they don't get long enough sentences. They don't have like Brian Peck only ended up serving 16 months.
Right.
I forget what Jason got, but he didn't. I'm sure he's out and about right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Probably doing something else to other kids, unfortunately. But I really disagreed with her reasoning on like, I didn't tell the police because I didn't want to look like a bad mom. Like I don't care
Yeah.
if I look like a bad dad.
I was like, you look like a bad parent now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a thing. It's especially common when it's a family member. You don't want to get, you don't want to cause a rift in the family. You oftentimes have grandparents or parents saying, hey, don't tell anybody, you're going to ruin the family, that type of stuff. There's no reason she couldn't go to the police on this one. No relation to
absolutely not.
him.
Yeah.
She wasn't working. Like her kid wasn't on the show anymore. You know what I mean?
It sounds like for what she was saying, that kid was never going to work in Hollywood again.
Exactly. Especially not after that. So, yeah, another thing Hollywood is good at doing is they find a way to keep the press off of it. So Jason doesn't get these big articles. He doesn't get the big headlines. Oh, child. And you would think that'd be solid news.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that's a good story. I'd start, like we're talking about it right now because it's a good story. Like, and it's worth shedding a light on. And like, you don't want these people working in Hollywood again, especially around kids.
Yeah.
Which happened to some of the people later in the series, right? But where was I going with that? Hollywood, yeah. I don't know how they do this, but they somehow find a way. I don't think it's that they keep it from the press because the journalists are so good at everything. They know.
Yeah.
If they have people that will report to them or they have sources that'll connect them to the good stories. Like good luck. It's hard to hide anything from the press. But Hollywood's really good at it. Either they hide it from them or they pay everybody off to not talk about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's my only explanation for it happening.
Right.
But how much money is in kid Hollywood?
A lot because it's not going to the actors. It's not going to the kids. It's not going to the kids' parents, right? The money is like if the studio looks bad, they're going to lose money. They're going to lose money on their bottom line. Another thing too, if it's on the set of All That, which is a big money maker for them, a lot of people may be more inclined to quit watching All That. And that's their big money maker. So it's like they pay X amount of people. They pay the victim to shut up. They pay the parents of the victim to shut up. And then they pay, I guess they have to be paying the journalist to keep it quiet.
Yeah.
Because it has to be a lot of money because that's a good
Right.
story. Like you're going to sell papers. You're going to get clicks on your website. I don't know what it was back in the 90s. I don't know if it was clicks or was it headlines. I don't know.
Probably headlines. Like
Yeah.
Newspaper. and all that.
Newspapers. Right. Exactly.
They're probably also using like intimidation tactics, maybe like you'll never work in this town again or something like
right.
that.
Yeah.
'Cause there's that one journalist that can't be bought.
Exactly.
Like they'll have the truth come out
Mhm.
no matter what. I wonder what happened to those people.
Yeah. And it might have to do with their networks. So the whoever's in charge of that news station, you got the journalist who's like, no, we got to press the story. But then when they run the story by the head of the office is probably the one that's paid off. And like, we're not going to run that story. Don't ask any questions about it. Now, there weren't no stories about it. And I think those are the ones they couldn't buy out. But
Right.
somehow they suppressed it enough to where it wasn't major headlines in Fox News and stuff.
Right.
Hollywood's really good. Not so much at covering up abuse of women, but they're very good at covering up child abuse stuff. And I honestly don't know how. I don't know how they do it.
Right.
It has to be a money thing. Like you said, they have to be paying them off because there's no way people can't hear about it. Journalists or if we were famous, they'd find a way to hide a camera facing us right now. You know what I mean? Like they know how to do that type of stuff. So I wish we could find a clear answer on that. Maybe that's something that'll come out over time. But that was my first thing, was like, how is nobody talking about this? Especially at the time. That still is major news. So, and then episode 2, they start talking about Brian Peck. I cannot remember.
They do. They do.
Okay. So Brian Peck, his first thing is he's the pickle guy. He's walking around almost like the cabbage guy from The Last Airbender. He's walking around. Okay. I can understand the innuendo is getting a little weird here. He's walking around with the pickle barrel, and he sticks it into what's basically a glory hole, right?
I don't remember any of that.
I don't either.
Show.
I don't.
What show is that, bro?
But even then, if you, because we were 7, 8, 9 years old when that show was coming out,
right?
So we wouldn't have gotten it anyway. To be honest with you, we wouldn't have understood, right? But I'm sitting here, I was like, how do they get away with this? Because he's got the big pickle, and he sticks it in the hole in the wall, and there's Ray from Everybody Loves Raymond, and he's like, oh my gosh, finally, he picks it up. He's like, he's eating it, and then Brian Peck's like, he's doing the weird face, like he's like, I was like, how do they get away with this?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think Dan had too much power at this point, and he already muddied the climate or the culture there. So
yeah.
Like no one's gonna think that that's out of pocket, and
right?
People who do, they're gonna silence.
Sure. And at that point, I mean, he had to have been doing about 30 seconds. I'll have to have you hit the record again, but not yet. He had to have. That's the thing. I wonder if Dan Schneider started doing things where he was pushing the boundary more and seeing what he could get away with. Because by the time Ariana Grande's in it, Jeanette McCurdy, and Miranda Cosgrove, he's going all out.
Yeah,
like
it's ridiculous.
He's doing crazy gross stuff. Yeah, so I'm wondering if earlier on he's pushing boundaries, because I don't know, the Brian Peck one was a big one with the pickles and the glory holes. That was a big one. But by that point he was building, because Zoe 101 had the fake lotion in the face shots, you know what I mean, like that, and that stuff. Like, okay, I don't know how on the nose that was at the time as an adult looking back when you compare it with all the other innuendos, sure. But then you get to what is it? Then you get to Brian Peck, the pickle guy, and you're like, okay, this is very weird. But by that point, I don't know if it was we did the other one, so it's probably fine. Or if it's we're all scared of Dan, we don't want to say anything, right?
It'd be a combination of all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So it's getting weird, but nobody notices. We as kids for sure didn't notice.
Oh, yeah, we had no idea.
And a lot of the kids in the show were like, we didn't get it either. Like, we didn't know. Like, we're kids. Like, I'm 13. I don't know what a guy sticking a pickle in a hole in a door means.
Yeah. I think one of the kids in Zoe 101, she overheard one of the guys saying, oh, it's a...
Yeah.
Can I say come?
No.
Okay. It's a funny shot.
Yeah, funny shot. There you go.
Yeah, funny shot.
And she still is like confused, but she remembers
she doesn't
that.
know what that means.
Yeah.
Now she's scarred for life.
Right. And it's like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. This episode's sponsored by Coca-Cola Spiced. First time trying it. How is it, Timmy? I'm kind of curious.
I don't know how they make a liquid spicy.
Mm-hmm. But they did.
They did.
Okay.
It's not as spicy as the flaming hot Mountain Dew.
I was just about to ask you about that too. No, you tried that at my house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good thing it's not that spicy.
Yeah.
This goes down smoother than that.
Okay. So you like it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to try it. I'm dieting, guys. I got a wedding coming up. I got to be in tip-top shape for it.
Woo.
But anyway. So, episode 2, it's building. And at the end, so we're introduced to Brian Peck. We're talked about Jason, the weirdo who gets arrested. Thank God. But to be honest, he's probably out and about doing it again. He's probably still working with kids. So those guys know how to just get in there. They know how to get people's trust. And
well, my thing is they get hired again.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brian, he went to jail for 18 months.
Yeah.
And then immediately goes to Disney.
I think it was 16, but yeah, it was lesser than that. Like not even 2 years.
Not even 2 years.
And then Disney Channel hires him, and he's working. Yeah, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. He's working with kids again. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I hope he didn't prey on anybody during that show, but it's like do they not do background checks? You know?
I'm pretty sure they had to know about this.
Right. Somebody had to have. But so let's look at have you seen The Predator? Not the old one with Arnold, but the most recent one. Maybe it was just, it was directed
Chris
by
Hansen?
Shane.
Or
No, the movie The Predator, like Alien versus Predator, but the Predator movie with the guy Shane Black directed it.
Huh.
But it's got the guy from Logan, he's the main character, and it's got Michael Keegan Key, like he's in it. Yeah, they're playing a bunch of war vets that are autistic.
Oh yeah, I did watch that one.
Yeah. So there was some drama behind the set of that because I think is her name Olivia Munn.
Yes.
Yeah, the main actress in that. She whistle blew on the original scene where she gets recruited by another actor. They had to cut that scene that actually properly introduced her. So that's why in the movie she just shows up and she's already there. But the original scene where she's talking to somebody she's talking to that introduces her properly, he was a registered offender as well with kids. But he got hired on. So what she did, which I applaud her for now, especially with this documentary coming out, she shined the light on it. It was like, hey, she told the higher ups, or she told somebody, and somebody made a big stink about it. It was like, hey, how do you get on set? Like, he's a kid offender. So they fired him, and then they cut out that scene. But after that, a lot of her co-stars, a lot of the producers, the director, because I think that was one of the director's friends, they gave her the cold shoulder. So anytime she shows up on set, or now she walks up, I don't know if you've ever walked up, especially in high school, you walk up to a group of people, and they just all stop talking, and they give you weird looks. And that's what they're doing to her on set because she snitched. And everyone's mad at her now because she got a nice guy fired. Right. And I think it's very similar. Either someone high up knows the charge, but they don't care, or they don't do background checks, or there's a bunch of people on the set doing the same thing. So it's like it takes one to know one. It's like, oh, it's him. He can help. I don't know. But Hollywood for sure doesn't take stuff like this seriously is what I'm getting at. And it's one of those reasons. They're not running checks, or one of their friends is a producer and he's like, yeah, I'll get you a job. Don't worry about your past. Like, new stuff, you're my friend, you're my buddy.
Yeah. And they're blackballing people who do point it out.
Right. Exactly. And I haven't seen Olivia Munn in a lot of stuff. Now, I don't think she's been blackballed, but definitely on set, she was very alienated after that.
Right.
And at the time, I didn't understand. I was a lot younger, say about 5 or 6 years ago now. Sheesh. I was still an adult, so not too big of an excuse. But it wasn't until I started doing more research into child abuse where I was like, these offenders shouldn't be working again, period. Like, hands down, they shouldn't be working again. But at the time, I was like, man, she really snitched on that guy. Like, oh, man, like she would have been better off. And maybe her career would have been better off. But as a person, she felt it necessary to shine a light on that and to get that guy fired. Like, why is he working? And I think that movie had a kid actor in it. Like, what, so it's like, why is this guy, why is he working? You know what I mean? And that's how she felt. Yeah. But at the time, I didn't get it because I was like, oh, she snitched or what, whatever. But now I'm looking back, I was like, that was brave of her to do. Because no one's doing it.
Right.
Well, the victims are only just now coming forward. But before that, people know, but they're not doing anything about it. Or they're just letting it slide by, and they're putting them in an environment where they're still working with kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? So before this documentary came out, that guy Jason's probably working in the same type of job. He's walking in with all the kids, or he's probably working at daycare, like something. They weasel their way into kid stuff because Hollywood doesn't care. Like I at this point, I can't say they don't know. There's no way they're not aware.
Yeah, I think they know.
But I think the bigger issue is they don't care at all. I don't think they're putting in the proper security measures to stop these people before they even get hired.
Right.
I think a lot of it has to do with they don't want the stigma of their show might lose ratings because of this. You know what I mean? That's part of it, the reputation. Two, especially in this case, they didn't want to lose Dan Schneider.
Yeah, the big idea guy and all that.
And a lot of stuff too is people like Brian Peck, people like Jason, child offenders. They're really good at gaslighting people into thinking they're innocent. They're really good. Brian Peck, especially when we get to episode 3. they're really good at getting people on their side, and whenever they do get caught, they're really good at talking people into it wasn't what they think. No, I would never do that, and people believe it because they think they're really close. They did really good laying a foundation for I'm this great person.
Right.
I'm this really fun person to be around. I'm this really cool guy. So I couldn't possibly do something like that because they built this reputation as the sweetest person ever, or someone that really gets along with kids. And there's a reason they get along with kids is because they're grooming them. But from everyone who doesn't know, they're really good with kids. From their perspective, they're really sweet with kids. Man, all the kids are always having so much fun.
Right.
You know, why wouldn't I trust him to help this kid? You know, he's a voice coach. So why wouldn't I trust him in a closed room to teach this kid?
Right.
You know what I mean? If this kid's struggling to project because they're shy, well, I need some alone time with the kid. So I need some space, guys. Go ahead and close the door behind you. Why wouldn't you think that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you think it's okay? You know, because he's built this reputation as the kids love him. All the adults love him. You know, he wouldn't do something like this.
Yeah,
you know?
and unfortunately, and you know this, it's a very calculated thing he's doing.
Mhm.
He's laying that foundation so that people won't think that's like, I've never seen this coming.
Exactly. And that's what took everyone off guard when Brian Peck was caught. And so we got 20 minutes left. We're probably going to have to do another episode on the same topic because I want to go through the Dan Schneider interview where he apologizes. But I think we can talk about episode 3 for now.
Yeah, episode 3 was mainly Drake Bell.
That's
right?
a big one. So episode 2 ends with they established who Brian Peck was, and they started going into like, okay, so now the skits are getting a little bit weirder. They're shoving pickles in holes. There's funny shots. Wink, YouTube. There's funny shots, and there's all this gross stuff going on, but nobody says anything. And then so then they laid down the foundation. Lay down the foundation for Brian Peck, and at the end they reveal like, well, he was one of the worst offenders. You know what I mean? And then they asked one of the guys who I forget who the bald guy was on the show that they were interviewing, what he did.
I forget his name.
But he, do you remember what his role was?
No.
Okay. Well, they asked him. They said, "Are you aware that that Brian Peck was a big offender and he was hurting kids?" And that guy's like, "What? On our show?" I'm like, "Yeah, on our show." And like, "What? Who?" Like, he was shocked. He didn't know. And then at the end of the episode, Drake Bell takes a seat and he doesn't say anything, but he's just like, you know, here we go. And then that's how the episode ends, if I'm correct, right? It ends like that. Yeah. Maybe I just remember the trailer. I want to talk about Drake Bell for a bit. Maybe we can talk about 3 and 4 in the next episode. But I want to talk about Drake Bell. Did you watch our episode where he interviewed on that podcast? Me and Darcy talked about it. Did you watch that episode?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. I want to lay down the foundation for that recap. I forget what episode that was. I meant to look it up. But in that episode, he interviews with a podcaster. And now in that interview, I felt like he was downplaying what he did. I feel like he was like smiling and chuckling about like, I thought he was bragging in a sense. But in that episode, I challenged him to like, he brought up, well, I haven't even told my side of the story yet. And so I challenged him, not that he heard it. I know he's not listening to my show, right? And,
Well, who's to say?
Yeah, maybe he did, because I tagged him in all the shorts too, and I tagged him in the episode. Probably not the best thing now, but hey, I didn't know the story was so crazy. But I challenged him to give us his side of the story, because like if it's that big of a story, why wouldn't you want to share it, especially if he's trying to gain sympathy for what he did?
Right.
Now, quick recap. He got in trouble very recently for child endangerment. Felony charges, not misdemeanor charges, not B misdemeanor, A misdemeanor, felony charges, which he pled guilty to. To his credit, he's admitted that he did it. He won't tell us quite what happened, but he says like basically what we only had proof of was he was sending messages to underage fans of his. As far as I know, he didn't meet with any of them. He didn't sleep with any of them. He denies it, and I'm inclined to believe him. Because if they did, I'm sure they would have found evidence. But they did find evidence of him texting, so they got him for child endangerment and sending. I forget, it was something sending salacious texts to minors. It was a distribution of harmful material to minors, which is broad, something like that. As far as I know, he didn't actually hurt any kids, as far as I know, and I believe him. But in that interview, I was kind of being a douche. I was like, look, Drake, like, I don't appreciate you downplaying what you did. I feel like he didn't. He says he takes responsibility, but he's like,
Yeah,
this girl victim blaming is what I
yeah,
called it.
the classic YouTube apology.
Right, right. So lo and behold, after that episode comes out, we drop they drop this documentary like a month or two later, and I was like, oh shoot, he does have a real story to tell.
Yeah, he tagged Cable, said, "Watch this."
Yeah, he tagged me. Oh, that'd be hilarious. So this interview, this documentary in general, is meant to not just shed light on Nickelodeon, but also a big part of Hollywood's problem. It's also a chance for Drake Bell to kind of redeem himself in a way, in the eyes of the public at least, or in our eyes, right? I think I would call it successful. Would you call it successful? Like, people are really sympathizing with him. Nobody's called for his head.
Mhm.
He was clowned a bit when he got in trouble, but nowadays, like, everyone's back on his side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how do you feel about that?
So, with the text messages, I heard that it came out that those were sent to a 15-year-old when he was 15. So
Mm.
I don't know. I didn't do my own research on that, but
Well, he wouldn't have gotten in trouble then.
I don't think he. I think the information came out later that he was 15. So
There's just okay, but he still got felony charges though. Like, he could have easily cleared that up.
yeah, was that for the child endangerment?
Right.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
admitted to that,
Right.
and I don't think he spoke on that in the documentary. You know.
Correct. And that's something I want to get to when we get to that. But he pled guilty as an adult to something. Like, if it happened when he was 15, he wouldn't have gotten in trouble like that. He wouldn't have had to plead guilty to anything because
Mhm.
he's a kid too. But no, he was an adult when this happened. And originally, he had joked about it before he pled guilty. He was joking about it, and he was liking tweets that were like, "Oh, this will all blow over." And he's like, laugh, react, like, yeah. He's
Oh.
liking those tweets,
Oh, geez.
right? So he downplayed it very much. So in that interview, this is after he pled guilty. He
Mhm.
also did a video where he was like, "Hey, I just want to talk about all the lies that are going on." He's like, and to his credit, he said, "Here's what I pled guilty to: child endangerment, but I didn't actually touch anybody."
Mhm.
Right? But I did make a mistake. And he's like, but there's a lot of stuff going around in the media that is not true. He's like, I never said, media says I moved to Mexico. Never happened. Right?
Mhm.
He's like, I went to Mexico, but I didn't flee to Mexico. Like, and he's laying all that out.
Right.
But when I watched that interview on that podcast, it really pissed me off because I was like, he's laughing and he's like, well, this kid, she was like harassing me after and blah, blah, blah. I was like, look, dude, like, doesn't matter. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It doesn't matter if this kid wants you. If a 15-year-old that, all the predators like to say, well, she's mature for her age, or he or she's mature for their age, or even if they're pretty. It doesn't matter if they're coming on to me or you. It doesn't matter if they're sending me pictures. It doesn't matter if they're flirting with me. It's our job as adults to say no and to shut it down. Not just say no,
Right.
but like shut it down. Like,
Mhm.
nobody. Like, if I was put in that position, I'd tell the parents, like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, let me screenshot what they sent me
Right.
and nip it in the bud before that happens.
Yeah, I'll tell everyone. I'll tell
Yeah.
The execs at Nickelodeon, like,
I could-
hey,
yeah.
this
Yeah.
kid's messing with
Yeah.
me. Here's just so you know.
I'd tell the police too. If they
Yeah.
sent me something really bad, they sent me a picture that I'm not supposed to see of a kid, I'd call the police and be like, hey,
Yeah.
I did not ask for this. Here's everything up front. Like,
Mhm.
before it gets caught, like before somehow it gets caught later, let me come forward with this, right? But that's
Yeah.
not. But so anyway, pled guilty to felony charges, and then he was kind of still joking about it after the fact. I felt like in that interview, especially, he was doing some victim blaming, and I agree or disagree. I think I broke down pretty well why I disagreed with what he was saying.
Yeah.
But this documentary is a way for him to springboard and to kind of like rebuild his reputation, which I applaud him for. If he actually didn't hurt any kids, he pled guilty, he's admitted to it, and he wants to move on as long as he doesn't do it again, and especially if he doesn't move forward and go further than he did the last time. Hopefully he's learned his lesson.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering how much what he went through as a kid plays into his decisions later to almost, not quite because he didn't follow through, but in a way he almost put another kid that was his age at the time of his abuse into a similar position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, had he not gotten caught or whatever, like who know? I mean, just who knows what would have gone on if he was allowed to, no strings attached, just kind of go forward with what he's trying to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I understand that. Like, is the case still ongoing with that?
that's done. No,
Okay.
yeah, he pled guilty, and they gave him, I forget. I mean, he didn't get any jail time. I think he just got probation or something like that. Now he wants to play it as, he said, like his lawyers talked him into it because, like, you know, you either take this deal or you take your chances in court and you could get actual jail time. He said, or you could take this deal and you'll go home today. You won't get any jail. And I was like, no. Like, if I'm not guilty, I'm not guilty. Like,
Right.
I'm not, I don't, like, you can dangle a deal in front of me. I'm not taking it because I didn't do anything. So,
Yeah, and that's pretty damning too. you
right,
know?
right. So the fact that you even like took a deal means you did something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I was saying in all his interviews, he downplays it. He says he was being stupid, or he says, like, you know, I sent texts I wasn't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But he always said it with that cocky smirk or with that like little bit of laughter in his voice, and that just always rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't think he won in the court of public opinion with this attitude during
Right.
that interview. You know, like
I disagree because in that interview, it wasn't the original poster. It was the Ultimate Drake Bell channel. I don't know if that's Drake Bell's channel, but it was a Drake Bell supporting channel, and it said, you know, free Drake Bell, uncancel Drake Bell. Like he's you know, people blew stuff out of proportion. You know, let this go about redeeming him. And I was like, no.
yeah. Well, to be fair, that's
Yeah.
his fan. That's a fan page, maybe.
Right,
So
right.
They're a little biased.
But there's a lot. I felt like there were a lot of people that were in support of it.
Okay.
But Darcy brought up a good point that like Drake Bell isn't famous enough to where it really matters. Like him bouncing back, it's not like he was a major movie star that has access to all these kids. You know what I mean? But I said, like, I think he's gonna bounce back because Hollywood doesn't take this type of stuff seriously,
Yeah.
and I'm right about that. But at the same time, I have to kind of scale it back a bit and look back and say he didn't actually hurt a kid. I feel like he was going to if it was able to go through all the way,
Yeah, it's possible.
but he didn't. At the end of the day, he didn't. He took a deal, pled guilty, and he's told everybody what I feel like to be the most of the truth. Like, you know, he hasn't gone into detail about what he sent, which is, I get it. You know, you wouldn't want to talk about that in detail. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
That'd be embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed. I wouldn't hop on any podcast if I got in trouble for that. You wouldn't see me trying to,
Right.
you know, I'm not R. Kelly, and I'm definitely not the, what's that guy that played Kang? Jonathan Majors. Like, they all hop on afterwards and try to explain themselves. I'm like, you guys look dumber. You look more,
You're not helping.
you look
Does
more
that
guilty.
ever help?
No.
I don't think that ever helps.
It didn't help me in the eyes with Drake Bell, right? I definitely was like, not feeling this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't come off as
Yeah.
not the good guy, but completely innocent, you know?
Yeah. Did episode 2 go into Dan Schneider at all? I don't remember. It was very much focused on laying out Brian Peck and talking about more of the child abuse crimes that were going on. It was very much more focused on that. But I don't think Dan got any love in this one.
Nah, not too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was focused on
yeah.
other things rather than Dan. But
We got
maybe
like
in episode 3.
we got like 8 minutes left. I'm trying to see what else we can talk about that way. I don't want to start episode 3. We're not going to finish it in time
No.
before the 9 minutes are up. And I want something to talk about next episode. So, yeah. I was also going to say in episode 2, nothing really still stood out to me that wasn't like a major problem in just Hollywood in general. You know what I mean? I was still like, yes, this happened at Nickelodeon. But like we talked about, was like he easily jumped to Disney Channel. But like in Hollywood, like it's a problem. It's a symptom of a larger issue in all of Hollywood. It's not a just Nickelodeon thing.
No, it's not.
And that's one thing I was a little bit disappointed with in the documentary is that Amanda Bynes. She's in episode 2. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. I'm so sorry. In regards to Dan Schneider, there's not as much evidence that he was the one hurting kids. This documentary, and it's not the documentary's fault. I personally don't think he was hurting kids unless something comes out later. He was a sexist pig.
Yeah.
I will say that. And that's shown in everything he did. So he's putting all these girls in these weird positions, and he's He's laughing. All the guys on set are laughing. They're joking. Look at that funny shot. You know what I mean? Like that. And he's just like he's trying to be the dude, bro. He's trying to be in control.
Yeah.
He likes making women feel dumb. So one thing I will say, I don't know what his intentions were with Amanda Bynes, but he tried to get conservatorship taken away from Amanda Bynes' parents.
Mm-hmm.
And he took them to court, or he helped her take them to court. So I didn't know this. And I meant to look this up, guys. Sorry. But in some cases, kids are allowed to not be parented anymore. The courts can take away their conservatorship, and the kid's in charge of their own life.
Mm-hmm.
So Amanda Bynes, she's hanging out with Dan. Dan loves her. They vibe. Like, she fits what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird. And
they're a little too close for sure.
Yeah. And it was definitely creepy.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm like, where are you going with this?
Mm-hmm.
He's hanging out there one-on-one. He's driving her around. Her parents aren't comfortable with it. And whenever they start, now that's her golden kid, right? I'm sorry, that's his golden kid. So when he gets mad at her parents, he doesn't cut Amanda Bynes because he loves her.
Mm-hmm.
He starts trying to fight the parents. He starts like, well, don't tell your parents where we're going. He starts funding her attempt to go to court and get their conservatorship taken away, so she's in charge of herself, and he can spend more time with her. I'm like, okay, Dan, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is creepy. This is weird. Like, and there's no proof. Because, like, Amanda Bynes, like, nobody really takes her claim seriously because she claimed her dad hurt her.
Mm-hmm.
She claimed all the stuff that everyone's saying about Dan, about her dad. So anything she says, nobody takes seriously because she has a lot of mental health issues, which we touched on a previous episode. Yeah, and you know what? She has serious mental health stuff, so I'm not talking bad about her per se.
Oh, yeah, it's been reported. So.
Right. But as far as I know, Dan didn't do anything to hurt kids. But with Amanda Bynes, it got really weird.
Yeah.
I don't know what his goal was. Was it just because he wanted control over her life? Or was he trying to get her isolated for his nefarious purposes? Or I don't know.
Yeah.
But that really rubbed me weird. I was like, why is nobody paying attention to this? Because she was major headlines. Her conservatorship thing was a big deal. How come nobody slapped Dan Schneider's name on that and said, oh, by the way, he's the one really pushing for her. And he's the one helping pay off the legal fees and all that kind of stuff. Nobody focused on that. And nobody's asking, like, that's weird.
It's very weird. It might be just another cover-up thing, like what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Like Nickelodeon is paying people to hush, to not talk about this. Don't bring his name in this.
And nobody's asking Dan why this is going on. Nobody's like, now, granted, he won't sit down in an interview. That's not where the interviewer is not holding questions that he wrote down himself that he wants to answer. Right.
The interview person's not part of his show.
Right.
You know?
Right. So he won't sit down with any legit journalist. He's definitely not going to sit down across from some of these actors that he screwed over or their parents, to be honest. But I'm like, I'm sitting here scratching my head, and I'm like, okay, what was he trying to do? And I wish someone would really press him on that because he was really pushing to get. It's like he wanted to be her dad or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I'm like, that really baffles me. I don't know what his intention was on that. He's not going to talk about it, right?
No.
And nobody's going to sit down and ask him it because I don't even know how to bring it up, to be honest with you. I was like, what was going on with you and Amanda, bro? like, ew. You know what I mean?
Excuse me.
Right. So that really confused me. And it wasn't the documentary's fault. There's just not enough information. So my point with that is Dan Schneider's definitely a weirdo. He's sexist and he's a pig. But there's not as much evidence against him as we would like to think. At the end of the day, when you read Jeanette McCurdy's book, which again, haven't read it, but when you at the end of the day, when you get done with it, there's nothing in there that really implicates him in a crime. He's definitely weird. There's not enough there to make it be like, okay, yeah, no, this guy's doing some freaky stuff. You know what I mean? All we got from him were innuendos. He had the weird thing with Amanda Bynes. We don't know why, but the documentary as a whole is not the Dan Schneider documentary. It's about Nickelodeon. It's about these key people. It highlights a problem in Hollywood, but not necessarily with all of Hollywood, just in Nickelodeon. I hope it blows the lid open and it really talks more about stuff going on in general with Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it will.
It's something that needs to be looked at because it's not looked at enough or at all, even.
Hopefully, like this documentary will be the start of other information coming out,
Right.
more people stepping up to speak out
Yeah.
against what's happening in
Exactly.
this industry. Because if there's one industry you want to keep safe, it's the one with kids. you
And
know?
it's even the fans aren't really paying attention to it either, because like something like this, like we'd be calling, like, okay, if this happened in church, which did happen at one point, it still happens, right?
Yeah.
But when the Catholic Church got busted with all these priests, everyone loved to talk about it. You
Mhm.
got all the YouTubers making jokes. You got comedians, Bill Burr making jokes about it. Like
Right.
everyone's disgusted with church. Everyone, but when it comes to Hollywood, when it comes to celebrities, people aren't as up in arms about it. They're up in arms about it when it's church or when it's something that actually tries to do good.
Mm-hmm.
And not in those instances. I was very sick and it needed to be exposed.
Yeah.
But they want to call for the heads of people that try to do good sometimes. Church has a bad stigma now with kids, and it's like good churches. Good churches are doing a lot of good work, but people love going up in arms against the church. But with Hollywood, even with people, even with fans, Drake Bell's attracting his following back.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's focusing on what he did anymore. But for some reason in Hollywood, not just by executives, but by fans too, they sweep everything under the rug, or the audiences are quick to forget.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Why are celebrities allowed to do what they want and be forgiven and being allowed to act again, and they still get to go hang out with audiences, and audiences are cool with it? Why is that?
Oh,
You know?
they entertain us. They make us laugh. They make us cry. They make us
Yeah.
feel all the emotions. So it's going to be harder. I think it's harder for us to hold those people accountable when we have these memories with them. Like they're, what's the word? Paradoxical.
Mm.
Like they're part of our lives in that way. So some people honestly don't want to see people in that light. You know? Yeah, it's people that we like, that people that entertain us, and I think part of that thinking is they make us laugh or they give us entertainment.
Yeah.
They couldn't possibly be into this stuff.
Right.
I think, especially back in the day, I think that's what a lot of people think.
And that's before the internet too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. So yeah, it's crazy. Celebrities can win audiences back over pretty easily, but everyone else, no, not so much. I think it's a double standard that should be changed, but hopefully this documentary takes the steps to rectify that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see though, because everyone's starting to get on Drake Bell's side again. But we'll dig more into that in the next episode. So Toomey, thanks for hopping on this week. We got one more with Toomey, and then we'll go from there. So see y'all next time. I hope you had fun, Toomey. How'd you feel? Was this a good discussion?
It was a good discussion. A little heavy, but
Yeah,
you know,
it is
it's
very
okay.
heavy. But that's what At Night's for. It's for these heavier discussions, You don't go light. We don't talk about this stuff on the regular show with Shaps.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Not with the kids,
No, not at all. Sorry, guys. Not a lot of my comedic flair this time, but, maybe we'll get to it the next one, because the next episode's even heavier. So, all right, guys, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us this week on the Third Wheel Podcast at Night. See y'all next time.